Chapter 15. All done. 2 days after her trip to the city, Sky woke in the night to a stuffy nose. Her pulse instantly raced as she recalled a cold was how the ag flu started. Her mind imagined the worst scenarios. But, once she cleared her nose, she found she inhaled with little problem. After that, she scolded herself both for losing control and her bleak thoughts. There are plenty of reasons I could be stuffy. After looking around, she saw one of her bedroom windows open. The raised frame looked dark against the light of the full moon. Fall allergy season was always an issue. Sky stumbled out of bed and took an allergy pill and settled back down for the rest of the night. One last thought drifted through her mind. But something is wrong. I know it. When she woke in the morning and drew in a deep breath, she could hear crackle of phlegm. Her throat burned. This time it wasn't so easy to tamp down the jittery panic that filled her. Sky covered her face with her hands. Then, gathering courage, she checked her lips, fingertips, and toes for blue discoloration. There were none. She blew out a long sigh and closed her eyes. Sky debated doing 1,000 things, but in the end, realized there was nothing she could do. As the day wore on, her body ached, and she did little else but lay on the couch dozing in and out of sleep. When she put her hand to her forehead, the vast contrast between her cold hand and her blazing face frightened her. When she tried to pull in a few slow, deep breaths only to cough uncontrollably, she sobbed. Is this it then? For a fleeting moment, she wondered if it would be better if it ended now. What kind of world will be left when this is all done, anyway? Nothing I will recognize, maybe nothing worth surviving. Sky trembled and broke down as the fear she'd been trying to ignore came back full force. There was no way to get better. She could only lay exhausted and empty with a single thought swirling through her mind on a continuous loop. I'm going to die. Even quarantine and the small comforts the medical community would have given her were out of the question now. The military had ordered Dr. Paul Kinder to close up his office and head for Fenton. And the city was too far away for her to drive in her worsening condition. Still, she did what she could. Sky checked her temperature throughout the day, watching as it went up and down. When it was high, she would climb into a bath of tepid water. But after doing that several times, it no longer kept her fever down. How do you distract yourself from your impending death? Numb, she stared at the ceiling. Sky took one difficult, rattling breath after another. She put her hand on her bracelets and gripped them as one would grasp the hand of a loved one. Once her fever rose to 103 degrees. She stopped taking it. She didn't want to know. Sometimes sobs racked her body. Sometimes she bowed her head in fervent prayer, lips racing with silent pleas to help her through this. Sometimes she did both. Once on legs that felt as though they would melt under her, she returned from the kitchen carrying a glass of water. After setting it on the coffee table, she saw 3 others sitting there. Sky fell onto the couch and stared at them. 3 other glasses of water she was unable to remember putting there. Every new symptom sent a chill down her spine. A small wail escaped her. Now I'm disoriented, I'm losing it. Sky got up and locked all the doors and windows, then barricaded them to the best of her ability. She didn't want to infect anyone, nor did she wish to become one of those lost, wandering people. That night the hallucinations started. Her body thrashed as her dream-filled mind swirled with images of shadowy people. They rushed toward her as she tried without success to get away. Puzzled, she looked down at the source of the problem, her feet. She lifted one foot, then another. Gooey, wobbly bands clung to the soles of her feet and held her to the earth. In her nightmare, she became obsessed with removing the slime. With flailing hands, she scraped at the ooze on her feet. She forgot about the malevolent monsters behind her. The evil was soon upon her, their vacant eyes staring at and through her at the same time. Rooted to the spot on weak, shaking legs, Sky watched as they came at her, her own hands raising to claw at her face in distress. The monsters' mouths opened wide, dripping blood-tinged foam, as they moved closer and closer. Sky's screams woke her. She lay on the couch with her hand to her thumping heart. Unsure if hours or days passed, it was daylight now. About the middle of the day, she thought. The house was sweltering, and she was slick with perspiration. Her mind was fuzzy as if she were dream-walking, and full comprehension seemed just beyond her. The strange mixture of reality and illusion bewildered her. She reached out a hand to touch an object, but her thoughts couldn't grasp it as something substantial. Through her haze, Sky pushed herself up from the couch, her weak arms scarcely up to the task. Her small, faltering steps moved her into the bathroom, then to the tub. She could do nothing about the sludge that coated her lungs, but she would not lay there drenched in slimy sweat. Removing her clothes took immense effort. She groaned as she peeled each item clinging to her sticky skin. Once she pulled off her last piece of damp clothing, Sky dropped into the half-filled tub of water. Exhausted from her efforts, her last coherent thought was that she no longer burned with fever. The next time Sky woke, she was choking, her body tightly convulsed. Sky gagged and retched, not from the water surrounding her, but from the flood of ooze that had been building in her lungs throughout the day. She rose to her knees and clung to the sides of the slippery tub for support. There was no thought, only instinct. This was a fight for breath. Any breath. The smallest one would suffice. The sound of her racing, thumping heart pounded in her ears. Her body jerked and thrashed, begging for air. So intense was the struggle that had she the breath to yell for help, it would not have entered her mind to do so. Sky's body curled around her starving lungs. Sweat again coursed down her neck, back, and chest. Her arms and legs shook without control as her terror-struck mind cleared. Sharp and aware, one bleak thought came to her. I am dying. And in that moment of clarity, Sky knew she didn't want to die. Ever. Let alone of this horrible, disgusting disease. No matter what this world was like now or later. Memories crowded her mind. There is always something to live for. All her doubts, worries and fears faded away. Determination grew until it filled up all the weak places within her. She would not die. One more small effort to clear her airway was what she had left in her depleted body. A cough was all she could do. A little one. Her slack form hardly moved with the strength of it. Although it took enormous battle, the effort was puny. Yet, it was all she needed. Mucus streamed from her nose and mouth. At first, thick and tough, then thinning out to a slimy, runny phlegm. Dark green streaked with red. It kept coming. A broad, never-ending stream. Unable to pull in a breath against the outward tide, she swayed, her vision blacking. Hands clenched, legs trembling, she continued vomiting the disgusting mass. At last, it stopped. Slow and careful, she inhaled. At first, the air burned. It seemed almost foreign to her lungs. Sky wanted to gulp the pure sweetness, but instead inhaled with as much care as she was able. She did not want to start another avalanche of mucus. Sky took one, then two shallow, beautiful breaths. I might make it a little longer. Sky sat on her knees in the cold, phlegmy water. Her head bent to the arm which draped over the edge of the old-fashioned tub. She wanted so much to get out of that bath, but she hadn't a single shred of power left to do so. So, she lay there. After a time, Sky gathered enough energy to haul herself out of the tub and pull the drain. She refilled it with clean water and bathed the sickness off of herself. All her strength sapped, she wrapped a towel around her body and tottered to the couch. She downed one of the 3 glasses of water left sitting on the coffee table. She laid down, pulled a blanket over herself, and in an instant, fell into a deep sleep. This time when Sky woke up, birds were singing. She smiled. The melodic whistles had never sounded as sweet as they did today. Her good spirits shattered when she sat up and gagged again. Sky grabbed a planter sitting within arm's reach. She dumped the plant onto the coffee table and coughed some remaining phlegm into the container. Still fatigued, the rest of the day she spent between bouts of choking thick saliva and sleeping. But she was alive. Alive. Even in her weakened state, Sky glowed, wanting to shout and scream for joy. Tears of appreciation came to her eyes. Maybe she was one of the fortunate few with a second chance. Those so rare, they were only rumors. She vowed that, from here on, she would help anyone she could. Other than the uncomfortable and revolting way the phlegm broke up and left her body, it surprised her how quickly she felt better. It was as if the disease, deciding it could not beat her, had slunk away like a frustrated cat. Sky dozed on the couch most of the day in silence until the television blared at her when the electric kicked on. Sure the hallucinations had started again, she stared at the TV in disbelief when the reporter told the story of the Atlantis cure. Really? Where is this cure then? Sky snapped it off. After falling to sleep a second time, she woke around dinner time and almost felt like herself. That night she slept more soundly than she had in a long time. When Sky opened her eyes, she drew in the deepest breath she could and felt the elation of lungs filled with air. She had only a slight cough, and her fever was still down. Sky quickly checked her lips, fingers, and toes for any sign of blue and found none. The tight band of anxiety and fear that had been wrapped around her chest for a while loosened. When Sky woke the next morning, she was astonished to find she was healthy. It was only then Sky let herself feel it. That lightness, that indescribable joy that comes over a person when the absolute impossible has suddenly become possible. With a grin from ear to ear, Sky skipped through the kitchen. After pulling out all her best food, she ate a huge breakfast. The first real solids she'd swallowed in days, she shoved the meal in as fast as she could. Then she picked up her iPhone and turned on her music. And she danced.